Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where here in the UK, we don't need air conditioning and we build our houses to keep the heat in our homes, which is fine until a crazy day like today. It's suddenly 32 degrees Celsius or 90 degrees Fahrenheit as I record this episode, as I'm dripping wet with sweat here, but that is an image that nobody wants in their head. So moving swiftly on, today I have invited Brendan Kiernan, co-founder at Hilo, onto the podcast. And Hilo creates moving experiences that connect brands with their consumers by bringing together the best in creative strategy, storytelling, production and event design. And they've worked with some incredible brands, including Amazon Studios, Hulu, Comcast, Bud Light and Santander, to name but a few. And they also recreated the 1862 World's Fair for the launch of one of Amazon Studios' most ambitious original films called Aeronauts. But I don't want to reveal too much here, so buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to the US, so we can speak with Brendan about the challenges and future of storytelling, and most importantly for this tech podcast, how technology and media consumption is continuously changing and how organisations can keep up. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
My name is Brendan Kiernan, and I'm one of the founders and managing partners of a company called Hilo. When people ask what we do, it's always a bit of an interesting question, because it used to be things were pretty siloed and pretty straightforward. Oh, you're a production company, you make films or you make commercials, or you're an event company, you put on events, or you represent artists and you help them with creating opportunities, managing those opportunities. Well, we kind of do all of those things. And what we really kind of boil it down to is we make moving experiences. And everything we do can fall under that rubric. And really, when we look at whether an opportunity is right for us or whether it's something we want to do, we judge it against that criteria. Is this something that's going to allow us to create a moving experience? And if it does, then we pursue it.
And I've got to ask, Hilo, where did the name come from? Is there a story there?
There is. There's sort of, as my business partner likes to say, sort of a lowbrow story and a highbrow story. And the highbrow version is, we took it from the Greek god Helios, and the idea of, sort of a lot of the work we do does involve creating content and telling stories through pictures. So, the god who carries the chariot, the sun across the sky every day, we kind of like that reference, and the idea of telling stories with light, which is essentially what filmmaking and content making is. And then the lowbrow version is one of the very first projects we did. We were working with a director who was a former Navy SEAL, and it was this was actually sort of an energy drink. For an energy drink, it was a short form content piece, and we had created this essentially what was meant to look like a forward airbase in some dusty kind of desert place. And one of the things in the piece was a helicopter, and it was kind of the main thing was this helicopter landing and these people getting on it. And the military slang term for a helicopter in the US is a Hilo. And so all day long on the radio, the Hilo is coming in, the Hilo. And at that point, we didn't even have a name yet for the company. And we really liked kind of how short and snappy it was. And also, that it was something we could kind of own. So those are the two origin stories.
They're both pretty cool though, aren't they? Right?
We like to think so. And the name is, as stuck. We've been around now for almost 10 years. And, the one thing we didn't think about in total transparency with the name is that it's very easy to say, but when you see it written Helo, a lot of people want to spell it as some kind of misspelled version of hello. So we get a lot of, oh, is it hello or Hilo? So in hindsight, we may have considered that, but we didn't. And here we are 10 years later.
And yeah, like you said, here we are 10 years later. But what about you? Can I ask that you share your origin story? I mean, where did your passion for tech come from? And what was it that put you on the path today? Because it always seems to be a happy accident in life that puts us on these paths. But what's your origin story?
I actually, I went to university at Stanford University in Palo Alto. And I, at that point, was very interested in telling stories and the way, the way to do that. And then when I, got out of university, obviously, as we all do, needed to figure out how to actually make a living and ended up working, strangely enough, in, kind of a technology capacity for a consulting company. And that in that world kind of learned, it was really right when and I'm dating myself, when the internet was really starting to take on its world-changing form and be a indelible part of our commercial and personal lives. And so I actually, myself and a couple of friends sort of had the audacity or naivete, depending on how you look at it, to start a web development company. This was in 1999, and it was called Texture Media, and we somehow managed to sort of keep it going, even though we really didn't know what we were doing. And then began to really use the tools that we had at our disposal, which at that point were quite rudimentary, but looking at ways to use technology to tell more interesting stories, or to create what we were calling at that point integrated brand experiences, and ways to bridge the physical and digital and narrative worlds. So at that point, it was things like, and I don't know if you remember these, but they're QTVRs, which were sort of panoramic photos you could take and stitch together. Video was at that point, dial up. So the quality was, the tiny thumbnails and terrible pixel quality. But using those things and experimenting with ways to tell stories that were sort of multi-platform, that might have different instantiations, it at a point of sale or a physical space, or something someone could watch online, and from there, I've just managed to keep that kind of through line throughout my career, doing a few different things. I had that original company, which was eventually bought by a big advertising network conglomerate, and then started another company that was more focused on sort of the content side, but still trying to, again, use the sort of latest and most interesting technologies to advance those stories, or to experiment with new ways of making them. And then, as of about 10 years ago, started Hilo with a business partner, and we've really honed our focus on that idea of this multi-platform storytelling and using technology as a way not to be the story, but to really to make the stories as immersive and interesting as possible.
So when that path led you to Hilo, what kind of problems was it that you wanted to set out and solve straight away for businesses?
Yeah, I think for us, what we saw was that obviously media consumption patterns were changing drastically, with the rise of the streaming platforms and obviously social media, and the ways in which those things were completely upending the traditional ways brands communicated with their audiences or potential clients or customers. And we felt that there was, and still are, better ways to engage audiences than talking at them or putting a commercial in front of them in between things that they actually want to watch. And so, looking at the ways those mega trends were going, and trying to find ways to, we always talk about really wanting, to engage and to immerse people rather than, to kind of blast them or talk at them. And so, that was the main way of orienting Hilo to try and solve that problem and to give brands and marketers better solutions when they're trying to look at ways to tell their stories.
Completely agree with you. And on that front, how are you seeing technology and media consumption continuously change even now? And also, how can organizations keep up with this continuous change?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pace of change is only increasing. And I think there's, probably fodder for an entirely different conversation. But I think there's, some very significant challenges that we face from not just an enterprise brand or, sort of product storytelling level, but from a, societal and cultural storytelling level. And I think, we need to recognize that some of the things that we've created, the technologies we've built and the ways people are currently getting information and sense making and meaning making in their lives, may not be fully or are not fully probably positive. And I think we do have a responsibility as storytellers, and particularly storytellers in a commercial environment, to acknowledge that and to look to try and tell better stories and to tell more meaningful stories, and to also to bring it back to the brands themselves, to really both give them the tools to do so, and also it sounds strange, but maybe even the permission to do so by pushing them and really asking them tough questions about what they're trying to do and what is really important to them and to their businesses. Maybe not just in the next product cycle, but longer term.
And for people hearing about Hilo for the first time, my understanding is that you guys create moving experiences that connect brands with their consumers by bringing together the best in creative strategy, storytelling, production, and event design. And you have worked with some huge brands, including Amazon Studios, Hulu, Comcast, Bud Light, and Santander, to name but a few. But I expect you can't name anybody in this, but are there any use cases that you can share just to help people understand what Hilo is and the kind of problems that you're solving right now with tech?
It's been an interesting year. Obviously, I mean, that's the most obvious and understatement of the century, probably. But in the specific context of your question, it's been a really interesting year because we've been forced to find different platforms and different ways of telling stories or creating those connections. And we had a couple projects this year that I felt really proud of in terms of working to find creative solutions, and through that process, innovating in ways maybe in some cases small, but in other cases, fairly significantly. For example, we did in one of these projects, I can name the brands and the clients and all that, and the other I have to keep it a little more anonymous. But we were able to work with Amazon Live and Mitsubishi to help Mitsubishi launch their new flagship automobile. And it was an interesting challenge because car launches have traditionally been, big in-person events with big press budgets, a lot of, personal interaction between the sort of PR and media and marketing groups and the journalists and influencers who write about cars and get people excited about them. And so that entire tool set was really taken away. So we had to figure out a way to tell the story that would still create, an interesting buzz, have that sense of an event, an unveiling, but also do so in a way that acknowledged the realities, from a kind of global health perspective. So, we created a launch that was a hybrid event that was part live experience, part We use Amazon Live. So, it was a live experience with some, really interesting sort of pre-recorded narrative woven together with a reveal and then a global Q&A. And, one of the insights there was that we didn't need to try and kind of go all pomp and circumstance or smoke and mirrors or, fireworks, however you want to say it. We didn't, need a K-pop dance band. What we needed to do was to really tell the story in ways that were kind of one-to-one and acknowledge that the audience was going to be sitting in front of their computer, by themselves probably, and try and find ways to talk to them, converse with them, rather than try and blow them away with something spectacular. It really went well. There was the event was highly watched from a live perspective, and the vehicle itself has proven to be quite successful in its initial launch for Mitsubishi. So that's an example of where we took, again, sort of the idea of media consumption, technology and the tools available, and narrative and storytelling, and combine them in in an interesting way to deliver a moving experience, and one that was effective at communicating the brand's message.
And you have been hugely successful and had a fantastic year, and there's a lot of hunger for the kind of work that you're doing right now. But I'm curious, what are your biggest challenges?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge we have at the moment is the uncertainty in the marketplace.
Yeah.
And the fact that, as we're all quite aware of, we've got this moment where there's this race between vaccines and variants and misinformation and science, and it's unclear to what extent we'll be able to, completely open up our societies again. And, a big part of our business is, and we believe in very deeply, the live experience and the in-person experience. And so, our conversations with our clients, a lot of them are, they want to get back to doing stuff of scale in person and live, but, there is still a sense of concern and hesitancy. And, I think some of that is obviously very warranted and, based on good public health information. But I think, there's also, it's sort of this push-pull between really wanting to be a first mover or to do something that really kind of sets the bar in this new normal we live in. And then also, everyone wanting to be smart and safe. So I'd say uncertainty, that what is really the biggest challenge we face.
And as everywhere begins to open back up and a lot of businesses are looking to bounce back and hit the ground running, what is it that excites you about the future and the road ahead?
Yeah, I think, what I'm most excited about is the potential of multi-platform storytelling, because I think we're at a moment where you have both the technology, and I think you have the sort of demand as well as the business opportunity for us to explore ways of telling stories that can exist across platforms. You can take traditional narratives that are told in film or TV or commercials, and you can bring them out into the real world in really interesting ways through live and immersive events. And then you can bridge those two worlds through digital tools that allow those stories to be both more immersive, but also to begin to evolve along with the audience itself, in a way that's more similar to gaming than it is a traditional film. So I'm really excited about experimenting and exploring that world for our clients over the coming years.
Excellent. Now, we started this podcast talking about your origin story, the origin story of the business Hilo there. Before I let you go, I want to have a little bit of fun and ask you, what's been the soundtrack to your career in technology? Is there a particular song or piece of music that has inspired you throughout your career, or just helps you get your head in the zone before a big meeting or working on something? What would your song be and why?
Honestly, this would be, it's an answer to your question, maybe not the direct answer, but the thing I've been listening to really like consistently over the last year, and I think it's just an amazing album. And I think like one of probably the pieces of art that will have come out of the pandemic that will stand the test of time is an album called Strawberry Mansion by an artist named Langhorne Slim. And I absolutely love it. And I've just been, it's one of those albums that I have not even gotten sick of, even though I listen to it almost every day. And, it's just got this incredibly beautiful mix of sort of the pathos and sort of fear and concern that we've all been having to live with, and also this just unending, indelible sense of hope and possibility and affirmation. And I really just love it, and it's definitely been my soundtrack for the last year.
Love that. And if you were to introduce someone to that album, I'm curious, which song would you play to them first?
Yeah, it's the first song on the album, and I think it's a great introduction to it. It's called Mighty Soul.
Love that. Well, I'll get that added to the playlist. So anyone wants to check it out before they dive into the album, they can do that. But before I let you go, for anyone wanting to find out more about Hilo and the work that you're doing or contact your team, what's the best starting point? Yeah,
the best way to reach us, unsurprisingly, is our website. It's www.flyhelo.com. And yeah, we certainly love to hear from anybody has any questions about what we do, or even just wants to chat about the future of storytelling. We're always up for it.
Excellent. Well, I'll have those links to the show notes. I've loved hearing more about the challenges that we face as storytellers, especially how they relate to how fast technology is changing too. But more than anything, hearing about yours and the origin story of Hilo too. Thank you so much for taking the time to share those with me today.
Yeah, Neil, very much appreciate you having me on the show, and I wish you the best of luck, and stay cool out there. Have some lemonade or a cold beer.
I recently read an article about today's guest where he was talking about the challenges we face as storytellers and how they relate to how fast technology is changing, especially how organizations and brand in particular continue to function, and how we as humans and consumers process that information. And he quoted, I think it was E.O. Wilson, where he said, "The real problem of humanity is we have emotions, medieval institutions, and godlike technology." So what a great guest, and certainly left me with lots to think about, and hopefully you too. And over to you. Please share with me your stories, thoughts, questions, insights by popping over to my website, techblogwriter.co.uk. You'll find links to contact me and links to the social channels. And finally, please, wherever you listen to this podcast, in particular Apple Podcast listeners, please rate and review the show wherever you listen, as it really does help in that ongoing battle against the dreaded algorithms. But it is time for me to hit a cold shower now, which again is not an image I should be leaving you with, but I will return again tomorrow. I've got another guest lined up, so hopefully you'll join me again. But a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.